we'll work our way through. Wanted to just start off, behind the scenes we've got a lot of people, or a handful of people that are making things happen. And I know this just seems, pretty basic stuff, but we have tech stuff, we have communication stuff, there's a lot of things happening. And, first of all, Jennifer, just want to thank you, Jennifer, for all the work you're doing to make this stuff happen and how it's impacting people. I saw 3 of you in our new office this last week, which was fantastic. And then we have some people working here on site. And just literally lives are impacted by a lot of behind the scenes work. So let's thank Jennifer. Let's give her a little round of applause. And, Josh on tech, appreciate that. Adam is making that trip in every time to do the filming, which has been nice for a lot of people who aren't able to make it, but still want to watch. We get a lot of that, especially this week. So appreciate those 2 guys. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this stuff just doesn't happen. And then really shout out to Jake and John, who work with me. John has flown in 3 times now for this lecture, 2 times from Grand Rapids and I think 1 from the Netherlands to be here and help out. So he puts that as a high priority to be here. And a lot of the presentation stuff, all the behind the scenes communication you get, putting all the data together, I'm not doing that. I just drop the mic and leave, okay? So let's thank John for that. Let's give him a round of applause for that. And then Jake is just filling in all the gaps. Jake has a full-time job outside of here. This is not his job. He just has expressed an interest in helping and has been here all the way from the original trade show that we did. I could not have gotten into some of the tech today if it wasn't for Jake moving all the stuff up here back and forth. So let's thank Jake too, okay? Yeah, I appreciate that. And if you do get a chance to just kind of give him a little fist bump or whatever, I appreciate it. I'm just the eye candy. No, that's not I'm definitely not that. So let's get started. We're going to pick up where we left off. Any impressions last time we kind of went a little off script a little bit, and I talked a lot about ADHD and some of the holes in that and attention and focus. Anything from that? Any questions? We're going to pick up, well, what do we do about it? I just won't want to poke holes and stuff, and then, well, yeah, that's what it is, right? Today we're going to talk about the solutions for that. But anything left over from our last talk you guys remember we watched the basketball player, Chris? So I'm going to talk a little bit today about, well, what did we do to help Chris, and how did we move that on? And we're going to be talking about performance today. Performance matters. Performance matters. Your performance and whether you show up matters. It matters in your roles at work, matters in your roles at home, matters in your roles in your community, in your church, wherever. Your performance matters. It's very, very important to many, many people. And so we want to talk about improving that performance. But any questions left over from last time, or just questions about life in general? No? Anything? All good? Okay. So if we're going to work with performance and talk about how performance matters, the first thing we have to do is we have to be able to measure it, right? I mean, we specifically brought the car in for that today. No, for some reason there's a car in the room, okay? But it's here, right? And you guys definitely live in a space where performance matters, right? But that car, or the cars that you're working on, you're constantly looking at performance. And what are you doing? You're measuring things, right? What happens if you didn't measure? You say, well, it's not running that good. Well, it's not that running that good because of, what are some reasons that a car might, I don't know. What are some reasons why a car might not perform well? Just give them to me. You guys should know these. Anything? What's that? Aero? It's all about aerodynamics. It's all about. That's what Justin and Chris, they are all over that, okay? So you can have a car that looks good. You know, it's like, man, that thing should go fast, right? And it doesn't. And what do? Well, just forget about it. Let's put some rocket fuel in it so it'll go faster. You know, let's put a chemical in it. No. There's some things to look at, right? So aerodynamics is huge, right? What else impacts a car's performance? Horsepower, okay? So you got an engine in there. We got to know what the horsepower is. We got to measure that, right? And understand that. And if it's not doing what it should do, we want to figure out, well, why isn't it measuring up to its horsepower? Oh, we got to remember that for later because that's going to come up when we talk about the brain. That's a really good one. Anything else? What else about that vehicle is going to affect its performance? What's that? Isn't that amazing? Good answer, Justin. The driver, John and I, we're actually having this discussion. We're doing a bunch of, I don't know how they're going to go with my voice, but a bunch of lectures up at Liberty University the next 2 days, and we're talking about the heart and different things. And I was talking about the heart as a car, but it really depends on the driver, which is the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and how you're using that. But the driver has a huge impact on performance. You can have a great working car, but the driver's not that good, right? Anything else? Anything else? I need a Sharpie marker. Is there any way I can get a Sharpie marker, Jennifer? Oh, I got one right here. Well, talk about prep. Look at you. Okay, it's mine. Okay. You don't want it back after this week that I have. It's full of virus now. Who knows what virus is on it? Let's say one more thing that affects performance on these vehicles. Suspension geometry. Now you're starting to get way outside of my bandwidth. Okay, so how the suspension works, I assume that's like alignment and all that kind of stuff, okay? You can have a great horsepower, energy. You can have great aerodynamics, a really good driver, but something's off in the suspension. No, that's not going to work, right? And it doesn't add up. It's like, why isn't this working correctly? And it could be, what was the full thing you said? Geometry of the, okay, yeah, see? Look at that. Man, you guys are smart. Cool stuff, what you do. Okay, so I need a volunteer. I won't get too close to you. Come on up. I want you to, what's your name again? Nate. Nate? Can you just stand right here for me? And John, can you help me out for a second? Okay, so let's pretend Nate is one of these cars, okay? And his performance matters, probably more important than the car, actually. I hate to say that, okay? Because I know we all invest so much time in the cars, but you're way more important than any car, okay? So Nate's going to show up at his job, and he's going to perform at a certain level. But his performance is impacted by some things, okay? So what are some things that you can think about that would impact Nate's performance? Just give me one thing at a time. If you can write them on these, and then peel them off for me, okay? Give me one thing, huh? Sleep. Come on, I don't want to touch you, but I want to give you a fist bump. Boom, okay. Sleep. What Nate did sleep-wise last night is going to affect his performance in how he shows up for all of you guys, for his employee. Like I have, back at a different company I was working at, I had this guy who come in and said, man, I was working on that project all night, Doc. We were doing draft testing for the NBA, and we had to get it in. And he says, I only got like 3 hours of sleep, but I'm good to go. I'm like, get out of here. Like, do I want that guy, putting this report together that's like an $8,000 report on 3 hours of sleep? No, I don't want him doing that because sleep is so important. Give me sleep. Okay. Let's give me something else for this guy. What else is important for this guy's performance to work? Let's come up with about 6 or 7 of these.
Breathing.
Look at you guys, you're cheating, okay? Breathing, how he breathes, because 85% of Nate's energy and how he's going to show up in his performance is going to be related to breathing. Is he taking time to breathe correctly, to fuel the engine, to make the heart work correctly, to impact sleep, and ultimately impact his performance? Is he breathing correctly, okay? What are some other things? You guys you're just, and it's fine, you're primarily addressing physiological things, but what other things impact his overall performance today? Nutrition. Okay, the energy we make from food is what operates our brain. 20% of whatever you eat today is going to go to fueling the brain, okay? And the type of fuel I'm using, just like that car, right? There's probably somebody in the building or a whole team of people that evaluate what food goes into that car, right? You're evaluating the fuel and how it works, right? Nate, his performance matters. And it depends on what he's eating too. If he's just eating carbohydrates all day, I mean, he's going to be crashing by 3, right? We got to get the proteins, we got to get the fats, we got the micronutrients, we got to get all that mixed in. What else matters? What's that?
Stress.
Man, so good. Stress, right? Like Nate's here, but he's bringing with him things from outside of here, right? He's bringing the unresolved past is still his present. Let's think about that. That's pretty heavy duty, Doc. The unresolved past is still his present. See, your brain is a learning machine, and if you have things that have happened in your life in the past that haven't really been figured out, your brain's still trying to figure it out, right? And it's trying to do that. It's unresolved past. So our stress levels impact our performance. Let's do 2 more, okay? And let me add one more thing to that. Also, his perception of the future. If it's what if, that gets the lion going, right? And the sympathetic is out of balance. You guys got all that down, right? Think of what we've covered. It's been pretty cool. But he's got the what ifs. What if? What's happening to the stress? And then he has to be available for you, and for you, and to perform here at work and at home and in life. That's impacted. His performance is impacted by these things. Let's put 2 more things on him. Attitude. Your personality, what you've learned, what you've shaped, how you see life, the lens by which you see it. You know, are you seeing it half full, half empty? Are you working? That's something that you have to work on all the time, is your attitude. Your attitude. I mean, John, I picked him up at the airport last night, and I was looking at the schedule that he has for me for tomorrow, and like, are you crazy? Like, you've got me speaking on the hour. We're going to get up at 6:30, drive to Lynchburg, and you've got me talking to the medical school, then you've got me talking to this guy, and then a lecture at 8 o'clock at night. And my attitude, down the drain. I'm like, I'm not going. You can go do it yourself, John. But then I started thinking, man, what a great opportunity, right? I'm going to interact with literally hundreds of people tomorrow and have an opportunity, even though my voice isn't working, to talk to them about some things that are amazing about them. These are all individual creations of God that I get to talk to. I mean, it's like almost a spiritual experience when I get to talk to you about your brain and how you've been created and wired. It's an amazing thing. And I do count that as an opportunity, but I have to check my attitude, right? And we got to check, is it already on there? Look at John. See? John's a good guy. Getting ready. Okay, 1 more. Exercise. So our overall level of fitness, okay? So that's preparation, okay? Being prepared to physically manage the day. It's funny that you mentioned this. I had something like this about a year ago, right? And I'm a very OCD about my steps. I mean, really OCD about my steps. I got to get 10,000, okay? And there's some very interesting stories about my 10,000 step things that my wife would tell you. But last year I got this similar thing, and I just didn't walk. You know, I was like, forget it. And I was getting like 1,000 steps a day. And I was so, like, at the end, this summer, I was trying to catch up from all those steps because I have a certain goal I try to hit each year. And Amy's like, you just did 30,000 steps today. I said, because of what I stinking did in January when I didn't do my steps right? So this thing came on, which got delivered to me via John's little kids, who brought them to me last weekend. We won't get into that discussion. But I started getting this thing and said, I'm not walking. I'm like, no, you gotta walk. You gotta keep it going. So up to this point, I've been getting my 10,000 steps in, even though the neighbors probably wonder what's going on with this guy as I'm crouched over, kind of shuffling down the street. But exercise matters. And what Nate is doing to that isn't just for him, you know, and looking a certain way, it's for how he's gonna perform, how his heart's gonna work, how everything's gonna work, okay? So, Nate, you gotta stay there. John, you can sit down if you want to. Actually, John's gonna stay up here because I need to get somebody that we're gonna hook your brain up. And this time we will look at their brain, okay? Actually, let's look at Nate's brain. Nate, you're coming over here. Okay, so he's going to stay there. Okay, so when we're looking at, a couple things just to kind of start off before we go a little bit further, because they're in the slideshow, I forgot. We are starting a radio show. John and I are doing our first broadcast today. Thursdays at 4, we're kind of pre-recording, but it's for a local radio station, and then it'll also turn into podcast and things that you can learn about, but it'll be weekly. You guys have an interest in, you know, learning about the brain. It's called Your Brain Matters, and that's starting up on Thursdays at 4, but it's also pre-recorded, and through our website you can listen to podcast versions of it and that kind of thing. But hey, let's keep the education going, right? What's your most important asset? Your brain, right? And it does matter, okay? 16th of December, I have a lecture coming up at Verdict Ridge Country Club in Denver. All of you are invited. It's free. If you know somebody, family member wants to come, just let us know. Email us or something so that we can put you on the RSVP list, or you can scan that before you go, okay? And then one other thing is we just opened the Birkdale Point office, so just a few minutes from here. Opened it November 1. That's available for, we'd love to see you guys there. Jake and I are primarily running some operations there, and we're seeing people for assessments, we're seeing people for training, and love to have you come up there. If you're JGR, you get a discount on assessments and training, and you can also use HSA and flex account money for that, so you get your tax savings on that. But just one little insight there. Let's go this way, Doc. Okay. So we talked about the problems with ADHD and how it's primarily diagnosed based on what? How are we primarily diagnosing these disorders, like when you go into your doctor's office, not just ADHD, but anxiety, depression? You're using the DSM, and what is the DSM primarily looking at? How did you know the DSM? Come on. Dang it, you're good. I mean, I wasn't expecting you to say the DSM. That's pretty good. But in the DSM is all about what's in there. What did you? They're just questions about behaviors, right? So almost all of these things are done via, did you guys need something? Okay. Via downstream behaviors, right? Hey, Doc, I'm feeling a little down. This isn't working out. I don't have much energy. Oh, you might have depression, okay? But is anybody looking at anything? They're just looking at behaviors. Or you might have anxiety, or you might have ADHD, or you might have a sleep problem. But they're primarily looking at behaviors, okay? I want us to look deeper, more multidimensionally when we're thinking about anything that we're experiencing. So I'm going to give you an 8-step process that I just want you to kind of put in your memory when you're thinking about if you have a family member that you're wondering about diagnosis of something or yourself, what should I be thinking about? Not necessarily with me or Roy or neuroscience, just in general, okay? That is like the gold standard because we need to be looking at the brain, okay? So we do want to start with behavioral assessment, but you want to use some really good checklists, not just something somebody made up. And so there's a really good one that we use that's called the ACEBA, and it's based off of thousands of people. And we can actually get you access to this where you take this 120 question, but it gets compared to all these different groups. What happens with a lot of these things like ADHD and anxiety is they just ask you questions about attention, okay? But they're not asking you questions about your sleep or your questions about anxiety, or maybe they're just asking you 6 questions about your sleep, but they're not asking you any questions about your mood, about your emotions, about your exercise, about these other things. So when you do look at behaviors, which is okay, we just have to look at them in a complex macro way. Next is you need to be looking beyond the behaviors to psychological functioning. Yes, somebody has attention, but do they have something else? Is there anxiety? We just assessed a pro athlete last week, excellent player in his sport. And his presenting question was that the head of performance had asked is, does he have ADHD? Because he answered these 4 questions on an ADHD questionnaire that was 8 questions long that all said that he has an attention problem. Like, well, let's start looking at some other things. So I started to assess him psychologically, looking at emotion, found out this guy was just riddled with anxiety. Well, do I want to take somebody who's just full of anxiety and give them an amphetamine? Speed? That's all that is. Do I want to give this guy speed? No. I need to look at the next layer down, which is psychologically address his anxiety, then let's see what's going on with his attention. Does that make sense? And one of the main things that we need to be aware of, and this happens so much, is in the area of depression, okay? Depression has been given the term the great imposter because it hides itself in so many ways. It hides itself in learning problems. It hides itself in addiction. It hides itself in attention issues. It hides itself in sleep problems. And it hides itself in poor satisfaction, not feeling fulfilled in things, midlife crises. It hides itself in memory loss. I used to work at a memory center, and you wouldn't believe how many people would come in and look like they have Alzheimer's. I mean, just flat out, it's Alzheimer's. Even on neuropsych testing, they look like they have Alzheimer's. I would test them psychologically for depression, and they would have depression. And I'd say, hey, before we go down the Alzheimer's track, let's treat their depression. 4 weeks later, you'd have no idea that this person was having memory problems because the depression had created something that looked like a memory problem. Does that make sense? This happens so often because people aren't going deeper. They need to look deeper, okay? Next thing we need to look at is intellectual potential. It's your answer right here. You said horsepower, okay? We have to, the expectation is that we're not all going to perform at the same level because we all have different intellectual horsepower. Does that make sense? And so, if I've got somebody who their intellectual horsepower is at 20%, that's what they are capable of. And in their work or in school or whatever they're doing, they're achieving at 20%. What would we say about that person? They're doing a pretty darn good job. And this happens a lot of times with people who have intellectual deficits is, of course they're not paying attention at the 50th percentile. Their brain, their intellectual capacity, is at the 20th percentile. I'm not expecting him to function at the 50th percentile because his underlying horsepower, his intellectual capacity, is this, right? And so all of our reference points are different because of different intellectual horsepower. We don't just make the assumption everybody should be the same. Does that make sense? Let me go a little bit deeper on this, okay? Jake, I know I will not find my way back here. So get on the ready for helping me find my way. okay? And there it is, okay. This is a really important point, so I want to make sure we understand this. I'm not an artist, you guys remember that, okay? Does anybody know what we call that? That's not a turtle. A bell curve, okay? So bell curve, you're learning so much. This is really fun, okay? So bell curve, and dead center on a bell curve would be what? What would the dead center be? Average, or the 50th percentile, right? So in IQ testing, when somebody says they have a certain level of IQ, the 50th percentile, does anybody know what the 50th percentile is? How do you know all this stuff? You're really smart. You're super smart. It's a 100. So the average IQ, so someone says that they got an IQ of 100, that doesn't mean their IQ is perfect. It means that it's at the 50th percentile. That's just the way the math works, okay? Now, if I do one of these, does anybody know what that is called? The standard deviation, okay? So what that means is in this range here is minus one standard deviation or plus one standard deviation, which means each category is about 34%. So about 70% of the population falls between these two numbers. So if we took 100 people, just randomly, not all people employed here because you're going to have a higher IQ, okay? You didn't just come off the street, okay? But if I just took the general population, you're going to find that about 70 to 75% fall between a minus one and plus one standard deviation, which is 15 points, meaning the IQs of 85 to 115 is what makes up about 70% of the population, okay? Guess what school is geared towards? 85 to 115, okay? As different academic institutions get more rigorous, you go higher or lower, okay? Now once I get above 115, I get to 130, and I get above 130, now I'm in the gifted range. If I get down here below 70, now I'm in the special ed range, okay? So somebody who has an IQ below 70, it's very hard to educate them here because the teachers aren't really prepped to do that. You need somebody who knows how to manage this. Does that make sense? Okay. So, intellectual horsepower. If I've got an intellectual horsepower of 115, but I measure your attention and you're a 90, am I achieving my intellectual horsepower in my attention? No. And what the government, or what we've defined as a learning disability or a problem, is a 21-point difference from whatever your IQ is between that and whatever we're measuring, like academics, attention, processing speed. So if I get an attention score of 90, that's greater than 21 points, and so now I have a problem in attention. Does that make sense? Now, we do the same thing with reading. You ever wonder how somebody gets a diagnosis of reading disability, okay? Is we start with the IQ, 115, let's say, and then I give them a reading test, and they make an 85. How many point difference is that, 85 to 115? 30. It's greater than 21 points. That person has a learning disability in reading because they can't perform at that level. Make sense? Now, what about, $1 million question, person has an 85 IQ, intellectual horsepower, but they get an 86 on a reading test. Do they have a reading disability? No. They have lower IQ, lower horsepower, and that's why it's important for us to understand that when we're measuring things like attention, reading, processing speed, those kind of things. Okay? Jake, I may need help back. Maybe, maybe not. What? I did it. Okay. Jake, I did it. Okay. So intellectual is very important. So when somebody comes in and they say, my child is not paying attention or you're not paying attention well, if I don't know what your horsepower is, I don't know what my expectation is. Very, very important. It's not just DSM answer, is he driven by a motor? What the heck does that mean? That's not what we're measuring, okay? Next thing is academic performance, like we talked about. So whatever it is, whatever that variable, academic, attention, whatever. Then looking specifically at attention testing where we're using a computer, 20-minute task called a continuous performance test, to see how well that person can pay attention to visual and auditory information over a 20-minute period of time, and how does that align to their IQ? Very important. Physiological measures, you guys know these things. Things like breathing patterns we've looked at, oxygen delivery, heart-brain coherence, and we're going to look here maybe at vision in a second. Sleep studies, we know that. And then lastly, brainwave analysis. What is the brain showing us? Okay, this is far different than going in and talking to your doctor for 15 minutes. This is figuring out what is going on in you as your brain and your body are working. So today for Nate, we're going to look at his brain. Okay, is he ready to go? Okay. John's on it. Okay. Yeah, get me to divergence. Yep, that's it. Yeah, hit view. Got it. Okay, so Nate comes in, he's got these different things going on. But I don't want to just look at behaviors. I want to look upstream at what Nate's brain is doing, okay? I figured out all these other variables. I'm at the highest level possible. This is Nate. You are looking at Nate and how his brain works. Right there at the bottom, 24/7. 24/7, he's making this electrical current. From the time he's born until the time he dies, he's making that pattern. Is that like a big wow or what? Like, how is he doing that? Well, nutrition is important, but 85% of that production of that electrical current is coming from what? Oxygen. He's making it. If that thing flatlined right now, we wouldn't have Nate anymore, okay? But he's doing this all the time, and how that thing is formed affects his performance, because in there are intricacies about Nate that are going to show us how his brain works, okay? 24/7, that thing's running. Now, inside of here, we have brain waves. See the light blue? Well, you can't tell that they're light blue and dark blue, but these two in this pattern up here. Okay, the bottom one up here is the brain waves related to stress. The one above that are the ones related to recovery. So they're his sympathetic brain waves and his parasympathetic brain waves. And I can see how balanced they are or how imbalanced they are by looking at these. We're going to look at the exact numbers. Nate had no idea that we were basically going to peel back his skull and look inside there today. But we're going to look at what makes his brain work. That is important to understand his downstream performance. If I don't understand these metrics, this is why when I do draft testing for the NFL, this is why these coaches and teams, they want to see what's under the hood. I don't want to just see what his results are on a DSM behavior checklist. I want to see what's the electrical current, because from that, I can see how he's going to perform under pressure. So let's go look. Okay. Nate, I'm sorry I just put you in the middle of this spot. I hope I have your approval to talk about your brain, right? Do we got approval to talk about your brain? Okay, good. Okay. We're going to look at 3 sets of brain waves. John, did you give me was he at assessment, CZ? And we did you went down and said complete? Yep. There it is. Perfect. Okay. So let's first look at, oh man, I hope this doesn't affect your job, okay? But here we go. Let's first look at Nate's level of creativity, okay? So the only way you can come up with a new idea are called alpha waves. Alpha waves. And they don't go so fast that you're actually thinking about like math or reading or a problem. They kind of go slow enough that your brain really isn't in reality, but it's just on the other side of it, okay? So when you come up with a new idea, okay, when somebody came up with that car design right there, they weren't just looking at all the cars that exist. They actually went someplace else and created something that didn't exist, okay? Or a new design, a Tesla, an iPhone. Those were all people stepping into alpha. The highest volume of alpha that a human can have at any area of the brain is 12.5 units. What I'm looking for is anything higher than 10. Nate comes in at a 12.4. Nate has a ton of creativity in his brain, okay? Let's give him, That is huge. I have athletes that are just like begging to get in the 12s because that's what makes you perform in pressure situations in ways that people weren't expecting you to. So when we drop our jaw at somebody, you're like, what the heck? That was an alpha moment. That was a guy that catches a ball like this, not even looking back, right? That's alpha that lets you do that. That's not like a mathematical formula. That's like creativity. When we look at beautiful art, listen to beautiful music, we're listening to alpha. And whatever his mode of creativity is, Nate might not know that, but underneath the hood is some really good alpha. And I can tell you that this room has a lot of good alpha. Many times I'll see people who are kind of frustrated in their job, and their job is very concrete. And I'll look at their brain and I'll be like, this has got to be like a prison for you because you have so much alpha. And we got to find a way to get that alpha out. Now, the flip side of this is when somebody gets depressed, their alpha really drops, right? And if you know somebody, if you've been depressed, you know how narrow your thinking kind of gets. Like any little thing is just overwhelming, okay? The other place you see that is in chronic marijuana use, is that the alpha just drops out completely. And every little thing creates so much effort when it's because the alpha isn't engaged like it needs to. But Nate's got some really cool alpha. Don't you think that might be important to know if he came into his doctor's office with a concern about something? And isn't it important to know for his performance? Because his performance matters, okay? Now, let's get to the theta ratios and the high beta ratios. Okay, so what we're looking at here, give me 1 second. Jake, I might need a little help. Just be on the wings. Okay. Yep, just be up here just in case. Okay. Okay, so we got our lion here. You got that for me, John? Yeah. Okay. And we got our parasympathetic here. Okay. So thetas are your brain's brake pedal. Okay? And in ADHD, what happens, you remember last time I told you there's this ratio, theta ratio, that improves diagnostic accuracy by 50%? That's this number. If you can see this number, you know instantaneously whether the person has ADHD or not. This number is going to be greater than 3.5. Go ahead and tilt that like that for me, okay? So make the parasympathetic high. So if his theta was 3.5, I would know that he has I'm sorry, it should be this way, my bad. He has too much parasympathetic weighing the brain down. That's why if I gave him an amphetamine to speed up his brain, he might feel a little bit more clear. But I haven't really fixed the problem, like why do you have too much theta in your brain? But that's very important to know before I start messing around with the brain, is how much theta is in there. Nate has a very good volume of theta at 3. The perfect number is right around 2.8, 2.7 to 2.8. So he's got a good volume of parasympathetic, okay? Now this next number we want to look at is the real biggie, okay? It's this high beta. What is high beta? It's a fast guy. It's the lion, okay? I can see immediately by looking upstream at your high beta how many of these guys are running through your head, okay? That's what high beta tells us. How many lions are in the room, okay? And in the perfect model, we want these to be less than 0.6, less than 0.6. Where is Nate? 0.49 at the center of his brain. So does he have too many lions in his head? No, he's doing pretty good. Now get this. The average of elite people is 0.48. Nate's pretty darn good. You mix that with some of his creativity, you might have a smidge of a focus issue, which we won't get into that, but just every once in a while. But all in all, the EEG is pretty good, okay? Now, I've had the opportunity, the privilege to look at #1 in the world in golf 5 times. And look at that person. What did they look like? Their high beta is a 0.3. They're just not there. It's just not, they don't see lions. They feel in control. The brain's not racing. 0.3. Isn't that amazing? All of us have the potential to be in that spot. We can actually train that into the brain. Other great opportunity many years ago to see somebody who was #1 in the world in tennis 9 times. Unbelievable. She's an iconic tennis player. 0.29. Isn't that interesting? Unbelievable. No lions. You could put her at Wimbledon final set, and she's just not turning it into what if, what about. That's what I do in pressure situations, right? What if, what about. Then a few years ago at the Beijing Olympics, I got to hook up the MVP of the NBA that year. Again, 0.29. So a common element in brains that are not anxious, that are very cool, calm under pressure, are you have very low high betas, okay? Let's look at one more spot. Did you measure T3? Okay, we didn't do measurement of T3. Okay, no worries. Let's look at one other brain though, okay? I'm just gonna pull up a random person, somebody that you don't know, and let's see what we see, okay? Let's do this person. Okay. Okay. What would we say about this person's alpha? They have good alpha, bad alpha. Are they depressed? Because they're not depressed, right? It'd be very low. 12.2. They're not as high as this guy, okay? But they're pretty good. Very important to know. Let's look at this. What would you say about their thetas? What I didn't tell you is we don't want your thetas, which are the recovery ones, to be below 2. We want them to be about 2.7, 2.8. If they get too high, they're an attention problem. If they get below 2, that means the brain's not sleeping correctly. And ultimately, if they get down to about 2.2, 2.3, you're going to start to experience memory problems, okay? What are we going to say about this person's theta? Is that good? Too low. Their brain is not dropping into parasympathetic. That's important to know if they come in and they start reporting different behaviors. What is going on in the brain upstream, right? And seeing that. When I did some of y'all's screenings at the health fair, we did have some people with some low thetas, and that's related to some of your sleep problems. Ultimately, if you don't fix those, and those get too low, those can affect your memory functioning, and we need that higher. Now, is this person's sleep problem ability to, their thetas being low, is it related to they have a lot of stress in their brain? Because where would we look for stress? What number would we look at? The high beta. And what's the high beta telling me? Is it above 0.6? No. So I now know this person's having a sleep problem, but it's not necessarily related to stress. It may be related to something else, like oxygen intake or something like that. But had they had a high beta of 0.9, what would we have said? We would have said, oh, the reason they're not sleeping is they're anxious. Do you guys agree that this is important stuff to know? Okay. Let's do one more thing. We got 5 minutes left. Okay. Actually, you want me to do the vision real quick, or what do you think? It's up to you. Okay. We'll start off next time with the vision. Let's thank Nate for coming on up here. And let's take these things off of you. Look at this guy. Okay. So, look at him. Fantastic. Man, I'm glad you had a good brain. Wouldn't that have been a real bummer? Everybody, we have to take a pause for a second, a commercial break. I need to have a chat with Nate about some things, okay? No, very good brain. Now, we only looked at one area of his brain. There's 21 areas on your brain that can be looked at, and that's very important to know. But the take-home point, okay, is don't just be satisfied with a behavior checklist of a specific thing that you're having problems with. There's so much more we need to be looking at. As we finish up, any questions for me? And John, can you work me back to the PowerPoint? Any questions? You guys got it all? Anything for next lecture that you would like to talk about? We're going to talk about vision at the beginning, but then we're going to close up. That's going to be called Reclaim Your Future, as it's our last lecture of this series. Does anybody have anything that you'd like us to address next time that we haven't addressed? Yes, Justin.
What did you do with the basketball player?
Yes, okay, very good. We looked at his EEG first, okay, and I'll tell you what his numbers were, okay, because we've talked about it in a lecture before. Chris's, well, first his IQ, now that you know how IQ works, his IQ was a 151. 151, okay? You're going to find 10,000 people and bring them in here, and you're not going to find somebody who's 151. School, there wasn't a professor that he ever had that was even close to his intellectual functioning, but his professors, he thought he was dumb. And that's why he's like, I don't want anybody to look at my IQ, right? But Chris, we went and looked at his brain. And his history of ADHD, he presented with a theta of 1.9. Theta 1.9. Is that in the ADHD range of 3.5? No. And it's actually low, right? Meaning something's going on with the sleep. Then imagine, all I could see when I saw that 1.9, because I was hoping it would be like a 4 or 5, right? And it was okay that he was on all these medicines to some point. But could you imagine at 3 years old when he had no theta and all of a sudden somebody put him on 3 times the amount of a stimulant? And then get this. I went and looked at his high beta. We want high beta to be below what? 0.6. Chris's high beta was a 1.2. He was just wired for sound. And it looked like ADHD, but what was going on in the sympathetic brainwaves? Lion, 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 right? And yes, I saw this giant of a man, but in my mind, I saw this 3.5-year-old. What was it like for this 3.5-year-old to be so anxious with no recovery, and then somebody gives him 3 times the dose of a stimulant? You know what that's called? Pharmacological abuse. And that's why he would say, I felt like I was always crawling out of my skin. Yeah, bet you were, right? Well, Chris and I first started on working on his breathing. He became a champion on coherence, which you know a lot about, Justin, on coherence. He was popping off 95s within 3 weeks. It was unbelievable. And then we started brain training. So in brain training, what we did was we took his high beta and had the headset on, and while he's watching a show, we made the movie stop and start, but only when his high beta would come down. Okay? So imagine this, okay? And I'll finish up soon here, but let's take this guy. So his high beta, a normal high beta would look like this. That's the fast waves, okay? Chris's high beta looked like this. Okay, does that make sense to you? That's the fast brain waves. Not all of them, just the fast brain waves. So his stress brain waves weren't less than 0.6. They were 1.2, okay? So you could maybe medicate that down with enough Valium, but then he wouldn't be able to walk. Like literally. I mean, this guy's got to play basketball. But you can chemically alter that. You could smoke enough weed to bring that down, but you're not going to know anybody in the room, okay? That's not how you fix that, because then the question isn't, well, can I move it? The question is, why is it out of balance? So this is what we did for Chris, is I had him wear the headset, and then I created a line for the EEG. EEG's coming in real time. We saw it with Nate. I'll get you out of here in just a couple minutes, okay? EEG's coming in real time. But I set this bar, this threshold, and I said, whenever Chris pops above the bar, I want to create a negative. Something that's negative for him. And then what do you think I want to do when he's below the bar? I want to do something what? Positive. So this goes back to the early research in UCLA in the early 70s for epilepsy. That literally, with this type of training, they were able to stop the person from having seizures without using medicine. And what they used was a light bulb. Off, on. The computer was about the size of this stage. Person would put the leads on, not like what Nate got to do today, okay? Put the leads on, and a big box would have this light bulb on top, and it would go on and off. But it would go off when the spikes for the epilepsy triggered, and it would stay on when the spikes were under control. Well, when the brain, what is the brain? It's a learning machine. It's the greatest potential you have is to learn. And if I give it the right feedback, just like those drivers get feedback from that car, I give them feedback, and the brain starts to learn. So in 20 minutes, I can do this over 2,000 times. Do you know what the brain starts to do? It doesn't like the light bulb going off, so it starts to change. And at about 10, 15 hours, 20-minute increments, the brain starts to control the light bulb from going off. Well, we could still use a light bulb and it would work. With autistic kids, I use like a train going around a track because they love that, you know. And the train stops when their anxiety goes up. And the train starts running when their anxiety's down. With Chris, what we do now, what we did then, is we watch any video. Anything you want to watch. Netflix, whatever, Prime. You watch it, but if Chris gave me a spike, what would happen to his video? Stop, like a skip. Chris, with his OCD, do you think he liked the skips? No. And so he's working on his breathing, and all of a sudden it comes under control. But then he starts thinking about this, and this. And what do you think happens? Stops. And then okay, get back down. Plays. Then he starts obsessing, and it goes back up again. His 1.2, within about 4 weeks, his 1.2 was about a 0.8. So then what do I do with the threshold? I move the threshold down. By the time we were done with Chris, he was a 0.3. 0.3. That year, he was an NBA All-Star. Went on to make millions and millions of dollars. I wish I had a percentage of that. Man, I wish I do. But it all started with us first identifying and measuring so we could manage it, right? Once I had those numbers, I was good to go. Prior to that, I was like, what's going on with this guy? But we started to attack that number through EEG feedback, And I can do that with any brain in this room. Move the brain waves with giving it feedback, because that's how you learn. And it was transformative for him, okay? So this is really, really cool stuff because it's better than using a medicine. We're actually fixing the brain, okay? Great question. Thanks for asking that question. And you'll learn more about that. If you read Einstein, we talk a lot about that in there. Okay, guys, I took you a little bit over. Thanks a lot. It was great being with you again. And I made it through. So one lecture down. Got to get ready for big day tomorrow with John. Okay. Thanks, guys.